Business Growth Talks podcast is created and hosted by Mark Hayward. In this show, we talk about how to grow a business in the growth stage. The growth stage is often marked by rapid developments, increased revenue, and an escalating customer base. In each episode, we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners who have grown businesses, and we cover topics like scaling processes, market expansion, financial management, human resource and talent development, and customer retention. If you are looking for actionable advice, tips, and techniques on how to grow, run and build your business, this is the podcast for you.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Business Growth Talks, the podcast where we delve into the strategies and stories behind some of the most successful business ventures. I'm your host, Mark Hayward, and today we have an incredible guest who has over 2 decades of experience in product and technology. Joining us today is Danny Nathan, a dynamic leader who has been instrumental in helping companies create new products and launch new ventures. Danny's career spans from founding innovative startups like Date Night Ears and Sia to drive major products for industry groups like Jägermeister, Dyson, and American Express. Known for his versatile roles in product manager, product person, UX expert, designer, strategist, and marketeer. Currently, Danny is the founder of Apollo 21, a unique blend of business consultancy, product design studio, and venture. He specializes in helping companies overcome complex business challenges and scale through technology solutions. We are going to explore lots of different areas for Danny, and thank you very much, Danny. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to a great chat.
Absolute pleasure. So, Danny, first question I ask all of my guests is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
That's a great question, Mark. I think a lot of that comes down to what aspect of business you're interested in or pursuing. But for me, that immediately brings to mind an entrepreneurial mindset and an innate curiosity to explore the world around you, to look for opportunities for creating new businesses or finding interesting new business models that can change the way that people either accomplish things or help them solve problems or just view the world around them.
So you talked about curiosity. So you've run a number of businesses. You seem to be a bit of a serial entrepreneur.
I'm afraid.
No, that's good. That's good. What would you say? How do you explain your curiosity? Where did it come from? Have you always had that and part of your makeup? And how have you been able to go through different businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely always had some sort of curious nature behind what I do. That being said, startups and business-minded entrepreneurial ventures came about for me relatively late in life, I had graduated from graduate school before I ever thought about starting my own business or what the world of startups looked like. And for me, that curiosity was born out of to be frank, it was born out of a distaste for where my career started. I started in the world of advertising on the creative side and very quickly realized that I didn't enjoy spending my days doing that work, in large part because I joined the world of advertising at a weird transitional point where when I went through ad school, everything that we learned was how to create TV spots, how to create newspaper and magazine ads, very traditional media outlets. And then I joined the workforce right around a time when the internet was becoming far more highly established and the idea of technology providing a touch point for consumers to get involved with businesses was really taking off. And so that kind of ignited that curiosity for me, and in part was driven by the frustration around how I had been trained to help companies interact with customers and consumers, and it just felt wrong to me. So I took it upon myself to give myself a crash course in what the next stage of the world looked like, and that really ignited that curiosity for me and the thought process around how businesses and consumers might interact.
We started off in advertising, which is an interesting area, and then you went into the product design and that. So I find that really interesting, that transition for you. What was that like for you when you were moving from one industry into another?
I was fortunate. In my frustration, I considered a number of paths to move forward that ranged anywhere from going after a second master's degree to leaving the country and going and exploring the world and all of that fun stuff. And for better or worse, happened to find a job before I took any of those drastic actions. And
Right.
I found myself working for a company here in New York called Poke, which was the New York branch of a London company by the same name, actually. And it was the first place that I had worked where the folks who ran the business were willing to say no and really willing to stick to their guns, so to speak, in terms of how they approached new business opportunities and what our clients and customers were asking us for. And it gave me the opportunity to be more provocative and more contrarian in my approach to the work that I was doing than anywhere I had seen before. And I think that in many ways smoothed that transition for me because it was an outlet for the frustration that I had felt in advertising, and I suddenly felt like I had found my people. I had found a group of people who were highly encouraging of speaking my mind when it came to ideas like, no, you shouldn't do that, or no, a TV spot that costs $1 million and is really just a brand screaming something at the world, regardless of whether the people on the other end of that megaphone were in their target market or anything like that. I had gotten really frustrated with that aspect of the world. And my time at Poke gave me an opportunity to branch out and explore other ways for brands and consumers to interact.
That's amazing. That's a really interesting story, the transition. And so I worked in corporate. All my audience know this. I worked in corporate for 14 years, 12, 13, 14 years, and left. I'd been doing my podcast for a long time, but left that environment. And the transition actually was something that I'd started many years ago.
Yeah.
And it was starting a self-development, like progression, and then went into business and entrepreneurship. And it was something that happened over a number of years. It was just not until I left the corporate job did I actually become the term business owner / entrepreneur.
Right.
So you were finding that frustration early doors, but was there, you said that end location of product design, which is really where you've excelled and you've created businesses. Rome wasn't built in a day. What were those key milestones where you were like, actually, I need to try something different, and then moving into that new area?
There were definitely key milestones. I'll be frank, it came down to, and this is utterly ingrained in my memory, there was one specific meeting at my last advertising job that for lack of better terms, broke me. If I can take a minute to tell the story, and I'll try to keep it brief, my art director partner, my copywriting partner and I were called into a meeting with the heads of our agency. And to make a long story short, they sat us down and said, we have $1 million to create an online game that will attract kids, and we need to come up with a great idea. The best that we have so far is an online Where's Waldo type of thing. And we were working for a company that makes pancake syrup, of all things. Yeah, exactly. And so
it's not the most natural fit, is it?
Exactly. And so they went on and on about how we had just completed a series of TV spots where the bottle, which happened to have kind of a human form factor, animated to life and talked to the kid on the table as mom's making pancakes in the background and blah, blah, blah. And so I sat through this meeting for about 45 minutes, and I don't think I said 2 words, and I could tell I was getting side-eye glances from the bosses. They were going like, you're not contributing here, come on. And I finally spoke up and said, okay, let me get this straight. The talking bottle is the essence of this brand, right? Because the strategy officer had spent a bunch of time explaining that early in the meeting, and they're going, yes, you get it, this is great. I said, rather than spending $1 million on a Where's Waldo game, why don't we literally just put talking bottles on the shelves in grocery stores so that kids get the same experience that we've just created in these TV spots? And the idea hit the room like a lead balloon, and it was just dead quiet in the room for what felt like an eternity and was probably a few seconds. And finally, my creative director looked at me and said, that's package design. That's outside of our purview. And that was it. I was entirely demoralized at that point. And from that day forward, I wish I could tell you that I threw my hands up and yelled I quit and ran out of the room, because it would make for a great story. But of course, I was young and starving and living in New York City. And so instead of walking out the door, that was the moment that really instigated change for me. And I had been writing for a blog and had been exploring the digital space more and more over the year and a half or so previous. And in that moment, following that moment, I went out and I bought a stack of books about Yay High that were from Seth Godin and a bunch of other folks that were espousing views of the world that aligned to the frustrations that I've described. And so I created a second MBA program for myself just through reading, and really forced myself to have a shift in mindset around what the possibilities were for the type of work that I was doing. And that set the tone for where I was looking for new jobs. I was looking at any place that was not an ad agency, basically. And I happened to then meet the folks at Poke, which then led to the opportunities that I've described, and really created a shift in my view of the world and my view of what was possible if you had folks that gave you the freedom and the autonomy to start saying to the brands knocking on the door, hey, we don't believe that's the way forward. We think that the solution to the problem you're describing is X. And if they didn't align to that type of thinking, that was fine. They went on and found a better partner than what we probably would have been, because we didn't align to their thinking. But we had the opportunity to work with some amazing brands. You mentioned a couple, American Express, Dyson, etc., General Mills. And I spent 5 years at Poke having the opportunity to work on projects with brands and partners that I probably never would have gotten my hands on otherwise. And so that experience introduced me to UX design, forced me to start thinking about what it meant to be a business in the age of technology, and what it meant to provide value for consumers first and foremost before you started asking something of them. And those experiences shaped everything that has come after.
Amazing. Thank you for explaining that and sharing that. Before we start going into more where you are now and what you're doing, let's go back. So tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
My mom told me something all the time, and throughout my childhood, I spent a lot of time in theater. I grew up in Texas, where if you didn't play football, you didn't exist, and I didn't play football. Instead, I was in the theater. And my mom continually said to me, keep exploring your own path, and when everybody else zigs, zag. Go your own direction. Figure out who you are. And that has literally become a rule that has guided my life. When they zig, zag. And it's something that I refer to often. So I've added a couple of my own rules since. But
and it sort of couples with the contrarian view that you got in Poke as well, because I often think various books and podcasts where people say about never follow everyone else, like always think about a different way of doing things. And I often think about, like, I'm quite contrarian with investing in stocks and things like that. If something is booming, then I look, okay, what's going to be the next thing, or where is that coming from, and trying to be contrarian about it. Do you think that has helped you in your life, your story that you said about your mother and as well as Poke? Do you think that there actually seems to be some alignment and some sort of connection between what your mum was telling you when you were a kid and what your experience was at Poke?
There's no question. Those two things align, and I think that the continuous encouragement to explore my own path and to make my own way in the world has impacted everything that I've done. I continued the pursuit of theater through my college years, and actually have a degree in acting, which a lot of people looked at me and said, what are you going to do with that? And that perspective on the world has encouraged me in just about everything that I have done, and has dictated that instead of taking the corporate career path, for example, that I have, as you pointed out, become a bit of a serial entrepreneur and somebody who is always trying to find my own way through things and find my own way towards success.
That's fantastic. And do you do any acting now in the theatre? Do you do any...
No, I gave that up after college, but I have to admit, even my mom, who, as I've espoused, set the tone for a lot of my way through the world, continually said to me during college, "Really? Are you sure you want to keep doing this?" And what I have found is that my path in acting has served me incredibly well throughout my career. And I did couple it with a second major in business and marketing at my mom's encouragement. But even she has come around at this point and said, you know what? Never in a million years would I have expected that your acting degree would serve you as well as I have seen it do. And the ability to talk to people, to articulate myself, to react on the fly, and to be comfortable in front of others has served me in my career probably better than just about anything else that I can point at.
Do you know something? Share an experience from me. The reason why I started this show 6.5 years ago was in my career, I was starting to do presentations and talks to groups, and I was agonizing over the preparation for it. And I still prepare incredibly well. Like these interviews, I spent an hour learning about you, Danny, before you're on the show. But the reason why I did the show was because I wanted to find my voice, more comfortable in my skin, all those cliches, but they are cliches for a reason. And it has helped me. And I feel now that I'm a lot more comfortable explaining things, talking to people, interviewing people. So I think there is an element of that, those soft skills, those presentation skills, being able to talk for you on a podcast, me interviewing on a podcast. These skills should not be underestimated, how valuable they can be in business, because so many people don't want to do sales calls, do these sorts of interviews, communicate with people. Do you think it has given you that leverage that sort of differentiated you as an entrepreneur?
Undeniably. What you're describing has the need to get in front of people, to make presentations, to talk to people, to learn how to ask people questions, things of that sort, I agree are inherent in the world of business. And I was fortunate that I didn't really struggle with that aspect of the business world, largely because I had spent years learning how to stand up in front of people, how to speak, how to listen. And you can look at it and say, okay, there's the theater side of it in terms of being on a stage and so on. But when you study acting in the theater for as long as I did, you also learn a lot about how to listen to people and how to pay attention to the nuance of what they're presenting, be it verbally or otherwise, so that you can react to it on stage. And what I have found is that it helps me be a better listener and become more attuned to the person across from me, even when I'm not on stage, because it has trained me to listen and to pay attention and to think about things like body language and things of that sort that help me track a conversation, that help me tell a story in terms of a presentation, things like that. And so it has been massively helpful.
Do you do show tunes as well?
No, one thing that I never learned how to do was sing, and believe me, you do not want me to try. It's not pretty.
Sorry, I'm only teasing you. I just wondered whether you branched into singing as well. All right,
no, that one, yeah, never happened there.
All right, let's get on to your experience in product. So, with your background in product in tech, what are some of the trends that are impacting businesses in the current market?
Can I give you the pat expected answer here, and then I'm happy to move beyond
and
it?
And then give me the real answer afterwards. But yes, give me the stock answer first. It's fine.
I mean, you cannot ask that question today without somebody saying AI. And
yes.
It's changing everything. It has already had, but it is going to have an incredible impact on everything that we do. And one of the biggest questions that we get today is, I think I need AI. How does that happen? Or we're behind the eight ball on AI. What do we do? And the reality in my mind is that while companies undeniably cannot ignore the advent of AI and what it is going to do and enable for their business, the sad truth is that most companies aren't ready to implement AI in truly impactful and meaningful ways for their business yet. Because for as much as we have all spent the last 10 years collecting data, most organizations have done a terrible job of figuring out how to structure that data and make it useful. And if as a human, you can't figure out what's going on with your data, it's a pretty big stretch to expect that some sort of AI agent might be able to do that for you without needing some help. And so we talk with a lot of our clients about how to prepare for the implementation of AI. We talk with a lot of our clients about some of the lower hanging fruit and existing AI tools that they can use today that will help make their lives incrementally easier as we build towards the tools that will make their lives dramatically easier. And then we also talk a lot about what you can do without actually implementing AI. And so we get into the world of automation a fair bit and thinking about simple if this then that opportunities around if this type of task comes through our workflow and we see X and Y are true, then we should blank. And that has played a massive role for how we approach our clients. A lot of the work that we do is heavily focused on helping clients build out useful, impactful automation that can be done quickly, that will change the way that their organizations work as we prepare for the deeper implementation of AI.
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you want tips and strategies on how to start, grow, and monetize your business online, check out the Digital Revolution podcast with Eli Adams. We interview digital experts from around the world that share their personal stories. They talk about what they're currently working on and where they see the future going. But most importantly, they share tactics in their specific area of expertise with the hope of helping you improve your digital presence online. You can listen to the Digital Revolution podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, or simply click on the link in the show notes below.
So it's interesting. So as an entrepreneur, we're told by people in the know that automation is the way to go. And I agree, when you're creating systems and processes, to be able to automate them makes a huge difference in your life as an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, a business owner, however you want to describe it. But it's interesting that do you help them with the strategy and the implementation of the automation? Because a lot of people primarily give the strategy and say, oh, this is what you need to do, and then push them out the door and say, okay, we're on to the next one. But you help them with the implementation as well, do you?
We do, and I think that that's one of the things that makes us as a company, and we haven't dug into the world of Apollo 21 yet, but as a bit of a hint, I think that's one of the things that differentiates us, and we pride ourselves on not giving the advice and then stepping away, because there's a lot of companies that do that, and it's frustrating. If you're sitting on the other side of that table and somebody says to you, oh, you should go blank. Great.
Should. I hate should.
I know.
Should is the worst word in the language, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. You should. Great. Thank you. I should. I should exercise every day. I should do a lot of things. But the reality is that if you can't make that tangible and actionable and help somebody figure out how to get beyond should and into the world of doing and did, then all of your advice is marginally helpful at best.
It's what the old management consultancies were brilliant at, wasn't it? They would stay with a team for 6 to 8 weeks, give a wonderful presentation at the end of it, and then just walk out the door. Awful. What an awful business model that we ended up with. And I do know I've got friends of mine that are doing something similar, not always in the tech, but in other industries. And she was saying to me, we're in the trenches with them. We're working with them to be able to make those steps. We're not just giving recommendations. It's so important for a business to actually learn through the process and not just get told to do it. And then you then have the issue of hiring the people to bring in to do what the recommendations are. And you're probably in spaces that you're not in terribly comfortable with. So I think that's it. So tell me exactly what Apollo 21 does and who you help and who you serve.
Yeah, that's a great segue because I'm itching to react to what you're saying by talking a bit about it. Okay. So I like to tell people that Apollo 21 sits at the intersection of a management consultancy, a product design studio, and there's a venture studio component to it that I'll leave for later. And the reason that I tell people that we sit at that intersection is literally exactly what we're talking about right now, Mark, because if I told you that we were a management consultancy, either inwardly or outwardly, you would probably roll your eyes and go, great, you're going to say should a lot, and you're going to hand me a presentation and leave. And that is not what we do. And to the point of what you've just described from your friend, one of the core tenets of our business is relentless collaboration. We also work very hard to ingrain ourselves into the organizations that we're working with and to ensure that when we are putting forward advice like you should, that we are following it up immediately with, and here's how we think it can be done, and we can help you accomplish it if you would like. And that's an important line to draw. We have executional capabilities in-house. We have folks who have built technology for their entire careers, and I've spent much of my career doing the same. And that's important because if you're going to give somebody that type of advice, and if you're going to help them think about the changes that will impact their business, that will help them scale, and that will help them achieve growth, you have to also be there to help them execute. And what we find is that a lot of our clients do not come from a technology background. Their businesses are not grounded in technology, at least beyond the reality of how much any business today is grounded in technology. And so they don't have product teams. They don't have software engineers. They don't have the in-house capability to implement the types of technologies, automations, AI, whatever it is that we're suggesting to them. And so we have to be ready, willing, and able to help them execute. And to your point, you also mentioned the idea of building the team. That's another one of the core tenets that we operate on is we expect that when we work with those types of clients, they will eventually outgrow us. And so I'll come back to that in 1 second, but generally our business is focused on one of three things. We help our clients build new products that exist within their current portfolio. Thumbs up. Yeah. We help clients build and launch new ventures that will enable greater scale and new business models beyond what they've explored to date. And then we help them solve core business problems by building technology for them. And so in doing that, what we find is that if we are successful in building a new product, in building a new venture alongside those teams, inevitably we're going to hit a point where they say to us, guys, this has been amazing. You've helped us create something new. We now need to operationalize that internally. And there's sort of two ways to look at that. You can either fight against that flow and try to hold on to that business and that client for as long as humanly possible and wring every penny out of them, which I have learned is not the way that I like to do business. Yeah. Or you can approach those engagements with the understanding from day one that in success, if we do our jobs, they're going to outgrow us. And they're going to come to us one day and say, guys, it's time for us to fly out of the nest. And I would rather build a business that helps those companies, that helps our partners prepare for that eventuality from day one. And that could mean that we help build their team internally. That could mean that we hire a team that we then utilize for the execution and literally hand off to our client. Our teams could become their team quite literally. And then they have the benefit of continuing to work with a team that is familiar with and that built that product or that service from the ground up and is now sitting in-house and has the capability to continue that activity, to grow, and to become the technology team that they may not have had at the start.
In essence, you're creating products, new lines of service or products that they have not thought about. So if it was, this is a terrible example, if they were a ketchup company, for example, you might then produce a brown sauce, a mayonnaise, it's a terrible example, I know, but essentially you do it with technology rather than condiments, but you're in essence looking for parallel businesses or business models that are still aligned with the business, but thinking about new product lines that they might not have thought about or they didn't have the capability to be able to develop.
That's exactly right. I love the condiment example, by the way, although we don't do much work in condiments yet. To help ground that a little bit, we often tell people there's no reason that Hyatt or Hilton or Marriott couldn't have started Airbnb, for example. There's no reason that a huge car rental company or the New York City taxi services couldn't have created Uber. But the reality is that as organizations grow, they become ingrained in whatever their day-to-day business is now. And it becomes very difficult to see past the blinders of what could we do if we stepped just beyond the comfort zone of hotel rooms, for example, and into the world of giving people places to stay. And it's such a simple, kind of almost minor shift in mentality of, we're a hotel company, we give people a place to stay. What else might align to the idea of giving people places to stay? Please, yeah.
Sorry to cut in. This is brilliant, right? And I tell you why it's brilliant, Danny, is because so many businesses, they get successful to an extent. They find one area, and the thing that's coming into my mind is Blockbusters versus Netflix.
Of course.
And Blockbuster said, we are a video company or a CD, like a DVD company, and we don't expand out of that. What do you, like, you see these companies and you're working with these companies. What is the mentality, the culture within a company that doesn't think strategically to other product lines just outside of their comfort zone? Why are these companies historically, I think Nokia as telephones, they didn't embrace it. What is it with culture of business which means that they won't think slightly outside the box?
There is so much to unpack for that question, Mark. In my experiences, as businesses grow, they focus on efficiency. And we look at publicly traded companies just as an example that often focus on shareholder returns, on quarterly returns, and on metrics that force them to keep the blinders on. Because the idea of exploration and innovation and the idea of cultivating growth and scale from areas that are just beyond your core business are inherently not efficient. They fall outside of those metrics that most businesses live and die by. For example, let's run with Blockbuster. Had Blockbuster looked around and said, hey, the internet's becoming a thing, I wonder if we can send movies over the internet, it would have required time and exploration and expenditure to get to the point to figure out, can we do it? Do people want it? Is there value there? Will people pay for it? Et cetera, et cetera. And that expenditure goes against the idea of creating shareholder value, mitigating risk, limiting the expenditure of capital, and ensuring that every penny sees a return within the shortest possible time period. And so as long as you're focused on those metrics, you're going to struggle to create tangible innovation that lives just beyond your reach.
This is so fascinating. I'm hooked. I'm absolutely hooked in this. And I've got a lot of different ways that I want to go. The one way I want to start with is, so the element of risk versus, risk and R&D. So research and development, that idea of going just outside your comfort zone and finding something. I'm finding that absolutely fascinating in our conversation, because R&D, whatever industry you're in, it should be a package that you should be looking at for the next trend, the next wave, the next direction you're going into.
Yes.
But what you said about quarterly metrics, everyone is just thinking about the next quarter. They're not thinking about where the next trend is coming. What is the essence of risk? Why are companies, even with all of our experiences of the last 60 years of there is always a growing trend, there's always a new wave, and you have to keep on top of it or you could die. Why is that risk of R&D so suppressed in companies?
I think it is because as companies grow, the primary focus becomes earning money today and creating those short-term returns so that the books look good, so that we can continue the growth trend that will keep our numbers moving in the right direction, that will then impact our stock prices positively, etc. And if you look at the trends across businesses, what we're finding today is that businesses are lasting for the lifetime of a business is much shorter today than it has been previously. Businesses are growing and then dying much faster than what we're used to. And Blockbuster is a great example. They had a great blip for whatever that time period of 10, 15, 20 years was from VHS through DVD, and now they're gone. And they're literally just gone. Maybe there's the last Blockbuster.
I don't think there's any left.
Yeah, exactly. And so by focusing on the now and ignoring the idea of longevity, effectively what you do is you limit your ability to enable the type of R&D, the type of innovation, the type of exploration, and ultimately the type of growth that will carry you beyond that short lifetime. And I don't have a great answer for why necessarily. Perhaps it's because as we look at how businesses and founders are growing today, they're getting enough in a short term. You look at unicorn type exits and you go, hey, if I can make $1 billion exit and walk away with a ton of money in my pocket in 5 or 10 years, why would I worry about extending that out so that my business lives 50 or 100 years, for example? And a lot of that comes down to the trend of, I think, not even a trend, just the realities of what it means to create an exit, for example. Founders today, when they create companies, are looking for the exit, either getting bought or getting to the point of IPO. And if you are looking for an exit, then you are inherently not going to be focused on longevity. You're not going to be thinking about what it means to build a legacy business that's going to last for a long time. And the reality is that starting companies is massively expensive, or at least it has been traditionally, in the way that we're seeing a lot of VCs encourage companies to grow, for example. And so the idea is that I need to take a bunch of money in to enable incredibly fast growth so that I can then take the money back out. And it's a huge shift from the way that companies started, where they were run by families generation after generation, for example, where the entire purpose of building that business was to create a legacy, was to create longevity, was to create something that your children could then grow into and take over and carry on and hand off yet again. And those shorter lifespans of companies are almost a forcing factor into the world of near-term returns and short-lived organizations that are not focused on innovation and growth, but rather are focused on dollars tomorrow.
I could do a whole episode with you just about that whole concept, because I'm now thinking it's all being driven by the CEO, the founder, the person, and if their exit plan is a major part of them starting their business. And I've had multiple people on this show who say when you start a business, you should be thinking about your exit before you've even started the business. And for me, as a business owner myself, I feel a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not in the tech space, I'm in the service industry, so it's a different model than a tech company that's growing and looking to then be bought or go to IPO. So it is a different model, but it saddens me in some ways that founders are thinking about how they can exit and not thinking about how they can grow their company, and it lasts 100 years rather than 5 years, gets sold, gets absorbed, broken up into lots of different bits. The bits the company likes they leverage and work with, and the bits they don't like they throw away. It saddens me that people's mentality is that. Maybe call me old-fashioned, whatever you do, but let me finish my rant. I want to ask a little bit more about Apollo 21. So you said you work at that intersection of consultancy, product design, and venture. So how is it that you're looking, and what's the market size that you're initially looking to target with your marketing?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
That's a really hard question, and it's one of those that I should be able to answer in a snap, because everybody talks about not starting a business unless you're your total addressable market and all of that fun stuff.
No, when you're, let's put it differently, that might make it easier to answer. When you're doing your marketing, looking for new clients, what's your ideal client that you're looking for?
We look for clients that are what I call mid-size to enterprise. Again, I'm going to throw large kind of swaths of numbers around. If you're doing $5-10 million of revenue a year, for example, you're getting to that size where you're probably starting to hit that point of lack of exploration, of focusing in on the things that are working. And you're probably right at that pivot point of, okay, we found product market fit. We know what works. We're gonna double down on that. Or you're already well down the line of that endeavor. For example, you look at enterprise clients, and for the ones that have been around for a little while, they've been doing the same thing. Perhaps they've been growing a bit, but just as an example, I've done a ton of work with American Express throughout my career. It just happens to be a client that has surfaced a number of times. And if you look at the way that technology could enable them to grow new business opportunities that serve their customers, the opportunity is greenfield. There's so many ways that you could look at the intersection of how people spend money and how people use technology to create really interesting products and services. And for the most part, they don't. New products and services from an American Express are, here's a new card with a different picture on it.
Yeah. But when it comes to money, what money loves is frictionless exchange.
Yes.
So why are, I don't want you to slag off American Express, but why are other companies like that? Why are they not looking like blockchain, for an example? Like we've had the advent of crypto, and there's good, there's bad, there's speculation, and I get that with crypto. But why aren't financial institutions, organizations looking for different ways to get frictionless exchange of value and exchange of money?
I think that there are financial organizations that are doing that, but they are the startups of the financial space. If you look at the
or
fintech
challenger
companies,
banks, you've got
Yes.
challenger banks as well that are doing it.
Exactly. So that is perfectly descriptive of the world that I'm attempting to describe here. You have your legacy banks, your legacy financial organizations that are, continuing business as usual. And I'm making gross generalizations here, to be clear.
Sure.
American
That's
Express,
fine.
of all companies, has released some really interesting technologies to help their customers. But to continue with my gross generalization, you have legacy companies that are focused on the core business that has helped them discover and achieve success. And then you have the traditional disruptive startups that are coming in and saying, no, there's a better way. We're going to do this. And let's be clear. One of the key opportunities for the legacy companies to then participate in the world of what might come next is through acquisition. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
That is a massive growth opportunity. And for American Express, just to keep on the train here, to go and acquire a company that is highly focused on making spending more seamless, that is a perfectly viable way to expand their business line, to capture new technology opportunities, etc. And it still just requires that mentality of, regardless of whether we're going to find and build the opportunity that lives just beyond what we're focused on today, or we're going to find the company that is focused on that and then go and you could acquire them, you could invest in them, you could partner with them to enable some sort of interesting capability that perhaps they're struggling with today. There's lots of ways that legacy companies can get involved and participate in the world of what is next that don't require them to go and build a technology team, for example.
Yeah. And your idea of new product lines. So how do you do the analysis when you're looking at a company? Maybe give a case study or an example of a a company that you worked with, but how do you go in and analyze the business and then think of those alternate revenue streams, alternate businesses, or how does one look at the market, look at the business, and look at the product that can be made?
A lot of the work that we do in that space, Mark, is less focused on us coming up with that answer and is more focused on us enabling our clients to do. So there's a process and a mentality and an approach to finding and discovering those opportunities that I think we're pretty good at, but it's less about us knowing the world of finance, for example. Or to give you another example, we had a client that was highly focused on the Western sports space. So think cowboys and rodeos and things like that. A very traditional business, if there ever was one, that was born out of the American West hundreds of years ago, kind of thing. A lot of what we do is less focused on telling those partners how they should expand and more about helping them discover those opportunities for themselves. Because the reality is that Apollo 21 is an organization of business and technology experts, not rodeo and finance experts. And so what we bring to the table are frameworks, exercises, third-party perspectives, and what it really comes down to is asking a lot of questions that at face value may sound dumb, that force people to think about things that they haven't thought about before. And some of that comes through customer development and finding out where their customer pain points are. So some of the activities that we bring in are interviewing customers. Some of those activities are focused on interviewing internal stakeholders to understand and uncover where they're seeing opportunities. And some of it really just comes down to giving people the stage on which they can articulate the ideas that they already have floating around. If you look at a business like, again, an American Express, a Dyson, whoever it is, they have hundreds of employees inside their own walls, if not thousands, who are focused every day on that core business. They have ideas. They have amazing ideas that could lead to growth, that could lead to scale, that could lead to new product lines, and they just aren't asking. And so half the time,
is it a mindset? Is it a mindset?
Yeah, it's
shift
absolutely a mindset.
Right.
Yes, without question. It is a mindset shift that requires and let's be clear, it has to come from the top down. It requires the leadership of that organization to be ready, willing, and able to ask those questions of the people both inside and outside their own walls, and to allow for experimentation, ultimately to allow for failure. And again, I talk a lot about failure, especially when I'm on shows like yours, because to me, failure and learning are so deeply connected to one another that if you don't allow your employees to fail, and again, it comes back to the internalized version of your quarterly shareholder goals. We also have quarterly employee goals and things like that. And if those goals are not designed to allow employees to experiment and ultimately fail on the path to discovery, innovation is not going to happen.
So you're coming from from what you've described, you're coming from a very tech mindset, that whole idea of fail fast and experiment, curiosity, fail fast, find the next thing, and then one of those, of the 5 things that you might be experimenting with, that one thing might be the thing to make it $1 trillion business, for example. So how do you, when you're working with maybe more traditional companies, how do you instill that idea of fail fast, get on to the next thing, one of those things will be the business, the next thing to catapult your business forward?
It can be difficult, and I want to be careful, Mark, because the idea of fail fast is one that is deeply ingrained in the entrepreneurial and startup mentality. And in my mind, speed is of the essence, but it's less about fail fast and more about experiment fast, learn fast, and then fail as little as possible. So the entire idea behind exploration is learning, is figuring out where those opportunities are so that you can mitigate risk. And I'm going to make this up, but pulling back to our Blockbuster example, Blockbuster could have looked at the world and said, the internet is changing everything, we should deliver movies over the internet. And in this case, history would tell that they would have been right. But at the time, that would have been a huge, scary question, especially if you think about where the internet itself was and the capabilities around delivering video over the internet, which of course is why Netflix, of all things, started with DVDs, even though they knew that they wanted to get to videos over the internet. And enabling your organization to ask the right questions around, do people want to watch videos over the internet, for example, is the first part of it. And then the second part is viewing those opportunities, those explorations, and the outcomes of them almost like you would a risk portfolio. We talk all the time in terms of investing, for example, that you want to diversify your portfolio and that you want to give yourself opportunity for wins. And the reality in this world is that the wins happen at such an exponential level that it only requires one or two to pay off 100 losses. And so what you have to help companies understand is that provided that you're experimenting quickly and cheaply, and the cheap part is important there because what you want to do is spend as little money to learn as much as possible, to mitigate as much risk as possible, to discover what you might do next. And if you're going to do that 100 times over, you can't go into that with the expectation that 98 of them are going to be successful and you'll eat the cost for the other two. You have to be prepared to go into that with the expectation that 98 of them will not be successful, but the two that are going to pay for the failures 100 times over. And
so it's creating minimal viable products, in essence. You're just trying to find MVPs
without question.
And then test them. And do you test them with market research? Is that how you test the market?
We test it every step. And again, one of the things that I think differentiates us highly is a lot of what I have a problem with the fail fast mentality is that it is so deeply ingrained in the idea of go and build, go and create an MVP, a thing that you can put out into the world so that you can test it. And that is not incorrect by any stretch, but there is so much learning that can be done before you ever build the MVP. And without getting into the now long debate of what exactly an MVP is, suffice it to say that through customer development processes, customer discovery, you can learn a ton before you ever go and build an MVP just by asking the right questions. And so a lot of what we encourage is building lean customer development and the practice of learning from your customers or potential customers before you build the MVP so that by the time you build it, you already know that you're down the right path and theoretically have already discovered your first 10, 20, 100 customers because you have asked them what the pain is that you can help them solve that is relevant to your business. So again, making it up, American Express could go to small business owners and should be talking to them about what are the difficulties with finances in your business and how can we help you solve them.
Yeah.
You're going to learn so much doing that before you ever go and build a thing to put in front of them and go, here's the solution, that you will be 10 times further ahead by the time you do build.
We could go on and on. I feel like I could do another hour of this, but unfortunately we're coming to the end. Look, I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, I really don't want to ask these questions. I want to keep on exploring business, but I've got to be respectful of your time. First question, what's the best decision that you've made?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Wow. I think the best decision that I've made comes back to a lot of what we were talking about in the advice from my mom. Folks, listen to your mom. That's probably the best decision that I've made, is listening to my mom. It is committing to a path of curiosity and a path of exploration myself in my career that did not pocket me into the traditional career path. And I could have gone and worked for some large organization doing the same thing every day, and I can tell you immediately that I would have been miserable doing so. And so in the interest of not being miserable, I think that's the best decision that I've made.
Awesome. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
We've talked a lot about when they zag, so I will leave that one by the wayside for the moment. The best piece of advice that I've been given it's one. I'm going to twist your question just a little bit here, Mark, because it fits my answer. Forgive me. But I have a personal mantra that is fail beautifully. And the idea of failure is something that I think about a lot. And the best piece of advice that comes out of that for me is learn to be okay with failure, because it is a learning experience and not a negative thing. And the reason that I'm twisting your question a little bit is because I can't point to an exact place where somebody said to me, go and be okay with failure. It's one of those things that I have just learned over and over again throughout my career in many different ways. And so the wisdom that I then try to impart is learn to be okay with failure.
Great. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
That would probably be a guy named Tom Agello, who was the one who gave me a chance at Poke. And the way that I found myself inside the walls of Poke was interesting. And everybody says to you, go find the people that you want to work for, go and make them pay attention to you. And it's such a pat piece of advice that we hear all the time, and is so hard to actually implement, because for the most part, you're going to get ignored. If you go knocking on doors, not many people want to answer that door anymore. However, don't give up on that, because that's exactly how I have managed to succeed in my life. I literally sent a cold email to the folks at Poke and said, I heard about you. I'm really interested in what you're doing. How do I get involved? And to his credit, Tom answered that email and gave me a chance, and was one of the first people that saw something in me that I'm not even entirely sure at the time I saw in myself. And he gave me the freedom to learn, the freedom to experiment, the freedom to fail, and ultimately enough rope to hang myself along the way. And I was fortunate that I managed to get through without doing that. But without his guidance and without the opportunities that he put in front of me, I wouldn't be where I am today, without question.
Amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
Ooh. This is one that has come hard-earned and hard-learned multiple times over now. I tend to trust first and allow people to prove me wrong, and it has bitten me in the butt a number of times, especially in the business world. I have often approach situations with the assumption that the people around me have my best interests at heart because they are people and genuine and so on. And I've learned time and again that for as much as I want to believe that everybody out there is operating with integrity and is going to look out for you as much as they're going to look out for themselves, it just isn't true. And so my regret is not learning soon enough that I believe you need to trust people, because if you start from a perspective of a lack of trust, you're also going to cause yourself problems. You should also learn to have a healthy skepticism and to think about what the motivating factors for other people in your world are, so that you can ensure that those motivating factors align.
So I'm learning that experience currently. I don't want to go into the ins and outs of it, but I trusted someone as a referral, someone that was given as a referral to me, and I trusted them, and my business partner, who I've been talking about this with, said to me, yeah, it's a hard lesson you've got to learn, unfortunately. And he says you gotta get to, I don't know if guns are the right word. You've got to get to your guns faster, because people don't always have your best interests at heart. They can be very selfish and very and I do believe in karma to an extent, that people that keep on doing things like that will run foul at a certain point.
Yes.
Like people who don't have integrity, they might win with you once, but at one stage they're going to fall foul. So for me, it's a learning experience, and equally, I know even if we don't bring him down, there will be someone will. So I would say, yeah, it's a lesson that we all have to learn. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. What are you most proud of?
Right now, I am most proud of the fact that Apollo 21 is still kicking and that we've managed to survive for 3 years. It has been, to put it bluntly, there have been moments where it's been a really rough go. And even today, there are things that we're struggling to overcome and to learn about in our quest to help companies achieve all of the things that you and I have talked about for the last hour. But all of that being said, I'm incredibly proud of the work that we have put in, and I am proud that we've managed to survive this long and hope that we will continue to thrive and find our footing.
And we've covered this next question, but it's one of the questions. Why do you do what you do? And you can take it from your business point of view, from being an entrepreneur, but why do you do what you do?
I do what I do because I know myself well enough to know that if I were stuck in a box, a cubicle, an office, whatever it was, every day of my life, working incredibly hard for the primary benefit of somebody else, I would be unhappy. And so I put up with the negative aspects of being an entrepreneur because the freedoms and the positive aspects of being an entrepreneur speak to me and frankly make my days, even the bad ones, better than they would be otherwise.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And what does legacy mean to you?
That's interesting. I've been asked this question before. For me, a lot of people, when they talk about legacy, especially in the business world, and to be clear, even I just hinted at this a few minutes ago, people talk about building a legacy and a lasting thing that they can hand to somebody else. And I think that's an amazing endeavor. And if you can achieve it, I would agree that is probably the most fulfilling version of what a legacy could be. However, that's also really hard, and we need to be ready to admit to the difficulty in that. And for me, a legacy is about positively impacting a few people around me in ways that will hopefully change their lives for the better. We're a very small team. I have 3 or 4 core employees who are with me all the time, and then we scale up and down based on the needs of a project. But those 3 or 4 people are folks that I've worked with at past companies who I trust implicitly, and who, if I can have a positive impact on their lives, if I can help them send their kids to college, if I can help them have a fulfilling career path because they're doing what we are doing together and they enjoy it, to me, that's a great legacy, regardless of whether it leaves something for a generation beyond me or not. The fact that I can change the lives of the people around me is great.
That's so important. And often that whole thing of helping your employees have a job, buy their first house, or whatever it is. Often legacy, people feel that the legacy is like passing on to another generation, and actually just scale it back. Impact 5 people, 3 people in your circle positively, because we're all going to get forgotten in 3 generations. Right. That's the reality of it. You're only going to really touch 3 generations. So if you can make an impact of those 3 to 5 to 10, whatever that number is in your life, is an incredible legacy and should not be downplayed. So that's a really great answer. Danny, last question. If people want to reach out to you, where can they find you and where should they go to?
Absolutely. Best place to find us is on our website, which is Apollo21, the number 2, the number 1.io. We have a bunch of case studies. We have a ton of articles and white papers and things that help espouse much of what I've been talking about and help share our approach to this type of work. And then both the company and myself are active on social media. I personally am blah, blah, blah / among many, AMONGMANY. And of course, Apollo 21 is active on all the socials as well. And if you happen to be listening from New York and you want to meet in person, 1, please reach out, but I also host monthly dinners for early stage founders, as well as monthly dinners for folks that are in the innovation space. And that is literally 6 people sitting around a table, getting to know one another over a meal. And so if you're interested in that, please do reach out to me. And I always enjoy meeting new people at those events.
Brilliant, Danny. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed this. I've got probably another 8 questions which I've not been able to ask you, so I apologize, but I've had a really great time. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation as well, Mark, so it's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for listening to Business Growth Talks. This podcast is released every Monday, so don't miss an episode by subscribing to all podcast platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Have a great day.